Thank you, David. We're very pleased to have Kyle Rieman as our speaker today. He is the Democrat running for Boone County Auditor. Welcome, Kyle. And we would like for you then to tell us about yourself and your interest in being Boone County Auditor. And you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Kyle Rieman. I'm 33. I grew up in Warsaw, Missouri. Moved here in 2011 upon graduating from Missouri State down in Springfield with degrees in sociology and economics to take an internship in Jeff City, working for Sarah Lampe, who was the ranking minority member on budget at the time. That turned into a, I guess, career in public policy that I had always kind of pursued, doing budget and policy analysis, both for the governor and the General Assembly, until I switched and took a position as the budget officer for the city of Columbia in 2020, to which I am no longer in, and some other things about me. I love board games and puzzles and spreadsheets and lots of nerdy things like that. I live over in Benton Stevens area with my fiance Colleen and my son Alistair, and we have 2 dogs and 3 cats, so we have a little zoo going on here. And then I also have some side businesses that I started when I first got out of college as well. And yeah, that's the gist of who I am. To kind of explain why I'm wanting to run for county auditor. So I started going to school board meetings when I was 14 down in Warsaw, to try and figure out how to make a difference, understand how policy works within bureaucratic organizations. That was pretty much my area of interest. So when I went to Missouri State, I didn't know what major I was going to go into. I just wanted to figure out how to make the most social impact possible in the area of policy and data-driven policy analysis. And that I ended up kind of going into the 2 areas of sociology and economics, and have kind of focused on trying to understand how bureaucracies evolve and adapt and change, and how leadership also works within those organizations. So at the county level, I think the county is in a transition period from going to more of a medium-sized bureaucratic organization that has a lot of individual office holders to a larger organization that we need to figure out a way to professionalize and institutionalize a lot of those policies and processes, because you've had the same people kind of running and operating the county for the last 30 years. But unfortunately, a lot of those practices and policies aren't really institutionalized in the organization through policy. They're more in the heads and the minds of the people who are running the offices. And that's a lot of what I did when I was at the state, was work with a lot of the different departments and divisions, come in on the analysis side, understand what they're doing, how it's being done in the other organizations of similar complexity, and then how to either like automate them, institutionalize the policy, or create crossover training, etc. So that is a lot of what my interest and focus is, because I think I have a skill set that is apt for the situation that we're at. The other thing that's going on in the county is they are getting a new, what's called an ERP, or Enterprise Resource Planning System, which is essentially an accounting, HR, finance system that can be an amazing tool to help with reporting, with tracking information, collecting data to help make more data-driven decisions. But it takes a lot of work to set that up and understand how to write the reporting, how to accurately collect the data and build into your call processes a way for it to passively collect the data instead of actively collecting it, because then that's cost money or cost in time if you can't build it into it in a passive way. That is an area of expertise that I had again at the state and at the city, because growing up in Warsaw, there wasn't a whole lot to do, so I started just tearing apart computers when I was like 12 and kind of speak the language and understand that world well. So it's always been kind of a natural fit. I was the ERP administrator at the city and at the state, so I had experience working with other ERP systems and policies and report writing, and have again a good skill set for that. Happy to take questions. I'm not great at promoting myself. And I guess as I tell everybody, I'm a very candid speaker. So I apologize if for my lack of formality, but I appreciate direct communication typically.
All right, so what questions do we have for Kyle? Looking for hands raised. We can call on people, or he can call on them. So we've got plenty of people here. The more people are showing up. Kyle, I've got a quick one. It's not necessarily not professionally related, but I've heard you mention wargaming. Was it wargaming or board gaming?
Board gaming, although there is a subgenre called wargaming, which is like tabletop miniatures, Warhammer, etc. But yeah, I started playing chess when I was 4. I was one of those kids, but wasn't very good, evidently. So, but I've always had an interest and been an avid war gamer, and have over 200 games myself.
So thank you for that personal insight. I'm a bit of a war gamer too. Okay, I see we have some other people with their hands raised. So Pam, go ahead. I want you to go first.
You're running for auditor, and I always thought an auditor had to have a CPA.
No, basically you have to be I don't have it exactly in front of me, but it's in chapter 55 of the revised statutes for the requirements, and basically have to be knowledgeable on the principles of accounting and finance, which through my 10 years I've audited counties and city, or I guess the city financials, county financials, other state financials, know how to read them. I've done preparation, did budget preparation. But no, there's no CPA requirement.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Herb, go ahead. You're next on the line.
Herb and Sue.
Herb, you're still muted.
I'm best muted. Thank you for telling us a little bit about your skills. It is not especially important that you be a CPA. It may be important in the modern world that you have the kind of formal modeling skills that Nicole had. I asked this as a former McNamara whiz kid, and you know what that means. So where do you fit in the scheme of this? The formal management, what they sometimes call management, accounting, and so forth, the things that help well beyond the auditing realm.
So where do I fall in the management of?
Where do you fall in terms of the skill sets that you have, and where up the ladder are you?
Sure. So
Nicole is the model.
So to kind of explain some of what I've done, I think that's probably the easiest way to start. So most of what my tenure has been doing is budget preparation, coming in, looking at working with all the different entities, which may be departments or whether that's state departments or city departments, et cetera, looking at their requests, understanding their budget requests, understanding their financials and their requests, and then basically taking those, distilling them down and saying like, well, what's really, asking the hard questions. Why do you really need this? Is this the best way to do it? Is this the most effective way? What are they doing in other entities? Give me, stuff to back up their argument. So that's one part of the job. Another part of it is coming in and basically doing revenue projections, growth projections, building models. I was in charge of all the fiscal notes for the state, so doing everything from Medicaid modeling to probation and parole and prison population growth models that I've made to try and figure out, okay, here's what we predict is going to happen. Build that into also making sentencing recommendations and statute of appropriate weight compared to, again, what the weights and for these types of sentences and what the impact will be on the system from a financial perspective and time burden, and also liability, because you have healthcare liability with offenders and things. So I've touched a lot of stuff. I've done tax credit analysis from everything from LIHTC to brownfield to some of the fun specialty ones that they've passed in the last few years, and trying to explain how those are or are not effective at the goal that they're trying to achieve. I'm really great at building Excel sheets and used to teach Excel classes for the state to other analysts, and built a lot of the models and systems that they have. I still get questions today on them. I don't know if there's any Excel nerds here, but I could talk hours about Excel and I dream in Excel sometimes. It's kind of embarrassing. Do a lot of policy research and analysis. I've written a lot of bills, administrative rules, internal policies, big on trying to figure out the appropriate weight of where a policy should be. And that's I think a common problem with a lot of organizations is a lot of times will put it in the wrong place, such as amending the Constitution for something that probably should be in statute because it's too hard to change the Constitution. And that's something that I think is a problem in our state, unfortunately. And I'm kind of answering the question for who just popped in the chat here. Welcome. I feel like I'm kind of rambling. I've also ran small businesses, so I understand how to do payroll, and I do all the accounting for all of those. I understand like the basic principles of accounting, debits, credits, GAAP, etc. That's required for a lot of public accounting and business accounting. I've done a lot of project management and leadership development. I'm big on creating teams and improving communication, institutionalizing that communication, and aligning incentives within the organization to encourage communication and not have what I call a lot of times policies and systems that more or less encourage or create a stronghold to where one person is in kind of control and it's their way or the highway. Those are typically not good. There should be ways of making checks and balances on office holders, even on the smaller scale. Big into like process automation, efficiency, doing agile or Lean Six Sigma. I've done a lot of that kind of stuff, process improvement side of things. And generally speaking, I'm pretty pro IT because I think it's a tool that can be used to help with a lot of things, but it needs to be done in a way that's simple and easy to understand and not complicated and more prone to error. So I'm not sure if I adequately answered your question, but no. Did I miss the question altogether?
No, you didn't miss it. You told me a lot about what you did. What I asked was your self-assessment.
Oh, myself.
You understand this as a formal modeling skills. that part of the work, which is what you theoretically could bring to bear, that we have a dearth of in Boone County in terms of, until very recently. And some people do it very well and are innovative. And some people are pedestrian or worse. This Missouri standard is somewhere down around the ankles. The national standard is considerably higher on the anatomy. Where are you in that pecking order?
I would say my self-assessment of, on modeling is pretty high. I used to work with I was part of NCA. When I was at the state, I was part of a group of fiscal officers across the country through NCSL, and often we would kind of share different tools and methods and models, because especially like Medicaid expansion is an example of one. It's extremely complicated, and there's lots of moving parts and pieces. And I was one of the leaders in that. So without trying to be too arrogant sounding, I feel like my self-assessment's pretty high. If that makes sense, if that's what you're asking me to do.
I'm glad you said so.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I could answer your question.
Go on to the next.
Thanks. Okay, Al Plummer, you got your hand raised. Why don't you go ahead, unmute yourself and share what you got?
Yes, what I'd like to know is what do you see as the major challenges confronting the office today?
I think the two biggest challenges in front of the office, the number one is going to be, and I think it's also an issue just in the county, is retention and institutional knowledge, retention that kind of goes with that. The office, the auditor's office is an office of 7. June's been there 32 years. My opponent has been there 11 and is essentially the deputy auditor. And there have been 2 people that have retired in the last year. There's not a lot of people that'll be retained, assuming my opponent does not want to retain. If I, do end up taking office, that means there'll be essentially me and 3 newbies out of an office of 7 that is already probably has a lot of work ahead of them, especially with the ERP implementation I was mentioning, which is the second challenge. That is definitely a big one because it touches everything in every department and affects the entire county. There's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of bugs that I'm sure we'll have to work through, and policies and systems. And so it's just going to take a lot of work. But once we get it working and set up and going, it'll be great. It just is going to take a lot of work coming in up front.
Have you formulated a strategy to address those?
Been working on that some, and I've been trying to talk a little bit with current office holders to help figure out a retention plan. And I think part of it is, I know some other candidates have been pretty vocal about this issue of retention and pay as well, and should be. And I think we've all kind of, even across party lines, it seems to be something that almost everyone can agree on is an issue. I'm not sure exactly what the number is, but I know a significant portion of the current employee base within the county is either eligible for retirement now or will be in the next 5 years. Also, for a lot of positions, especially the more technical positions, like in my office, pay is below the market average with recent increases. So I've been trying to collect data and information to provide to inform when coming in, hopefully inform commission and other office holders of what is competitive and would potentially solve the issue. And then on the ERP side, that one I have tried to figure out a little bit of how I can start working on that before taking office, but it's a little hard because I'm not an employee of the county at this point, and there's on the HR side, I think some sensitive information that can't just have an everyday citizen, access, and it just doesn't seem like I'll be able to do anything until I get in the office, unfortunately, with that issue.
Kyle, to springboard off of that, since this is a supervisory management position, what are your supervisory background as far as having people working under you?
Sure. So the most, when I was the director for the Joint Command Legislative Research, I was in charge of a team of 15. That was the largest staff that I have led. And had an assistant director. So, it was me and him and, 14 others. I definitely take my approach is always to try and build up my employees and figure out ways for them to improve in their career. And even if that means them not staying with the organization, because I want them to be happy and progress in their own personal lives. And that builds connections. That's always been my approach. I also, manage a team of 5 at the City of Columbia. And see my role as much more of again, a leader is trying to make sure all the ships go on time and the staff can perform and do everything and kind of provide an oversight leadership teachery role is kind of been my approach.
Thank you. Alice, you had your hand up earlier. Do you still have a question or
Well,
comment?
I guess it was similar to what you just asked, David. I was just asking him about his supervisory background, and maybe he could just add a little bit on, what is his concept of being a boss? He's going to be supervising these 7 people and working to retain them. How does he view being a boss?
Sure. So what got me into public policy still is all about building community and collaboration, trying to distill down the differences and figure out how we can all work together in different ways or find common ground. And that's definitely my approach in an office, is to build, try and build teams that work together, communicate well. Aren't a lot of times when I've come into other positions, there's a lot of protectiveness that sometimes happens with different workload stuff. Well, I'm in charge of this, or this person's in charge of that, and they don't want to necessarily share that information with other staff or analysts because that's job security for them, or that's what they've always known. And we're all here to do the same job. We're all here to try and achieve the mission and the goal of the organization. And so I really try and work on building a sense of community and cross training, so that way people can help and that also helps prevent employees from being overloaded, certain employees being overloaded at certain different times, just because their tasks or departments or issues are hot at a certain point when the others aren't. That way it's easier to be able to lower everyone's stress level and workload. And ultimately my goal is I'm much more focused on them achieving results and the effectiveness than it is about butts and seats kind of approach, if that makes sense.
All right.
And I'm not sure, does that help answer your question?
Sure, it does. Thank you, Kyle.
Thanks,
Yeah, no
Alice.
problem.
We have another chat question from Mr. Schneeberger. He says, I haven't seen you at our Democratic events. Are you a team player? Give examples. I remember seeing you at the chili picnic chili at the the picnic last year. But anyway, share how you see you fitting yourself fitting in with the Democratic Party, the local Democratic Party, maybe what you can do or what you have done or would you like to do with the rest of the Democrats.
Yeah, I was at the I guess, was it the chili? I can't remember the name of it, whatever the summer picnic was. But I've not been to a lot, and honestly, up until the last couple of years, my role was always to be in a nonpartisan role. That was the nature of my job. So I worked with both sides of the aisle, and still will. So I have a lot of good relationships with Democrats and Republicans. Personally, I definitely fall more in line with Democratic values and structures in terms of policy, more so on the social side than anything. As far as like being a team player, I mean, my goal and objective is again to get good policy that makes sense for the people, and I'm always going to be out there advocating to try and do what makes sense, not even if it's not a popular conception, if that makes sense. But I think that is the best way I can explain. Like, I'm always trying to be a team player to help people just make good policy, period.
And this, I didn't written it down, so I may be mumbling through the question a bit, but it's kind of a typical job interview question. So since you haven't had direct, maybe supervisory experience, but it sounds like you have had leadership experience running groups and projects and things like that. Could you share with us from your experience some incident where the team members didn't get along or weren't working together, and either what you did about that to help get things back on track or what you learned from that?
Sure. And just to be clear, I do have direct supervisory experience, and I again was in charge of a team of 15 and a chart 7, like hiring, firing, etc. But at the city, we had a great team. It's easier with smaller groups, typically speaking, so we didn't have a lot of conflict or issues there. I was lucky, and we did, just had a great staff. I also had a great staff when I was at the Joint Committee. However, anytime, getting 16 people, including myself, all together is definitely, you get different personalities, different ways of doing things. Some people who are more color organized oriented, and others are more, letter number organized, if that makes sense. And we have to collaborate a lot on how we organize our information and data. And when you got that many moving pieces and personalities, a lot of times it's just trying to figure out, well, how can we understand the differences? So I do a lot of team building stuff like True Colors, Myers-Briggs. Not that I believe that those are tried and true methods, but they at least provide common language and ideas and concepts that people can then use when they in the office and workplace, to be able to then identify how strengths and weaknesses and differences among their peers, and hopefully be able to use that to be able to communicate and express their frustrations or figure out a compromise on how to work together better. So that's all part of, again, I'm big on understanding role clarity, and how everyone fits into the organization, because everyone has a role to play.
Thank you. My apologies. I missed the part earlier where you head professional. Good job. Herb, you have your hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself and share what you got.
Several of us are obviously offering you opportunities to engage in a bit of puffery and promote yourself. You're not always rising to the bait. But let me do it once more. Boone County is a bit strange in that we have a populous and it's an urbanized county to a great extent, but we have divided everything up into among large numbers of elected officials and therefore coordinating things is like herding cats. The situation with the kind of work which the auditor should do in terms of leadership, in terms of fiscal analysis and modernizations, all that stuff, requires political persuasion as well as technical skill. What in your background demonstrates your abilities in this domain? It's not the least a nasty thing. It's a good thing and a necessary thing, but it's another part of the skills. Have you got it? And point to some of the things that show you got it.
So I work, I worked on a lot of, I've been fortunate enough to be able to work on a lot of big issues in our state from my time at Jeff City. And probably an example of one of the things that I did was really help provide a lot of information when we were doing the criminal code rewrite back in between 2014 to 16. If you're aware, for those who aren't aware, we rewrote and revised our criminal code. And one of the big things that they did there was decriminalize marijuana. And that was something I had a strong, I guess, kind of a strong hand behind the scenes in trying to convince people, both governor at the time who had been a prosecutor for 16 years and wasn't too apt for that kind of thing, and was thinking about running for US, for other offices, and saw that as maybe too polarizing from a political perspective, to also a bunch of a fairly conservative General Assembly that was fairly anti-marijuana. But when it was, explained to them that, well, all right, we're putting people away, majority people who are in our prison system that is overloaded and costing us $47,000 per offender per year, and explaining the growth and the strain on the system for what are we getting out of this? What is the benefit? What else could we do with these funds? Put it and showed like putting it towards whether it's drug treatment or programs or drug court programs, or even, again, it shouldn't maybe even be criminal for a certain amount, which is where we ended up going. And now we're ready to, it's kind of crazy for me because we've shifted dramatically in those conversations in the last decade in the state, but with it now being on the ballot, coming up in a few weeks to completely make it legal. But I think that's probably a good example, and I've done a lot of those things, but most of my stuff is not, that I've worked on, a lot of times is not super sexy, to be quite frank. It's a lot of nuts and bolts and behind the scenes stuff. I've done a lot, and it's trying to understand how to get people on the same page whenever there's political pressures on that give them incentive to not be. And that's an example of where I thought that was a fairly big win, given that neither party at the start of it was for it, and we were able to convince them, well, this could save us literally millions of dollars. So what can you do with that instead?
All right, thank you, Kyle. Caleb Hall has his hand raised. So Caleb, unmute yourself and share your question.
Sure. Hi, Kyle. Thanks for coming and talking this afternoon. If someone were interested in supporting your campaign or door knocking or dropping lit, are you running your campaign solo, or are you coordinating with other county candidates right now? Or basically give us more information on how we can help you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I've never, again, my world, that's probably the thing I'm the weakest at. I've never ran a campaign. I've never been on a campaign, or, I've always been on the nuts and bolts policy end of it. So it's new for me. It's frankly fairly uncomfortable to go, because it feels very ego driven, and it's not, I like the data to speak, not myself. I just support the data. That's been my approach. But I do have a Facebook page that's out there. It'd be great if people would be willing to share that and like it. You know, if people are interested in door knocking or helping out with in other ways, feel free to message me on there, or you can email me at friends of Kyle Rieman at gmail.com. Do have, you know, do have a walk piece that I'm getting, you know, going to be knocking doors and doing things, and would love anyone who's willing to help. But a lot of stuff I'm like, I don't even know, you know, just like at the beginning of this meeting, there's a parade, didn't know about the parade, no one's explained it, you know, and maybe I should be looking for those opportunities, but I'm been more trying to focus on trying to make sure that when I take office, I understand what it needs to be done and what the staffing situation is going to be like, and what skill, you know, because I don't want to come in and not have any way to have the office run. So as much as I can learn now has been more of my focus. So going over prior reports, issues, reading statute, looking at other counties, talking to other county auditors, first-class county auditors, et cetera. It's been a lot of what I've been doing. So does that, and I don't know if there's a way you can share maybe my email and Facebook with your organization.
You can put it in the chat, and that, at least, although I think that email you mentioned to us was already in the announcements, and that will be sent out. We send out our announcements every week to our membership. So people
Your
can look.
email is in our list.
Okay. Yeah, and then
Please do put your Facebook contact in the chat. I've been looking for a way to find a website or a Facebook contact for you for weeks, so I can put it on our candidates page. Thanks.
yeah, I think this should do it, right? Does that work?
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, let me check what the- yeah.
Any other questions?
I'm looking for hands. Okay, Herb has his hand raised again. Go ahead and unmute again, Herb.
Never invite questions when Herb's in the audience. I am full of questions and no answers. What is your assessment of the electoral prospects? What's the strength of your candidacy in comparison? Do you have a campaign manager? What's the state of your treasury? And so on and so forth.
I don't. I guess my campaign manager is my fiance. At this point, you know, she's been extremely helpful and is much better at, you know, social media and graphics and things that I'm not good at. But I'm great at keeping track of data. So I like that. As far as what, you know, I think part of your question is what makes me more qualified compared to my opponent. Is that?
I wasn't asking your qualifications. I was asking about the state of the race. Are you ahead? Are you behind? Are you even?
I honestly don't know. Again, I'm a very poor judge of this, because I've never worked on campaigns or even ran one, and just being totally honest about it. My sense is, I mean, I feel like I have a lot of great supporters, and encourage people encouraging me, I feel like, you know, I do feel like I am the best one for the job, not because I honestly don't have anything real negative to say about my opponent. I just think that he doesn't have a lot of drive or vision to take it and evolve the office to improve it. I think it'll be a lot of the status quo, and that's all he's known. He's worked there 11 years. He's got a lot of institutional knowledge. It's great, but and he's out there kind of saying I'm not qualified, which was one of the questions that I think was asked. You know, he doesn't have a CPA either, just for the record, nor an accounting degree. He has a general business degree with emphasis in accounting, but I'm not saying he's not qualified. I would say he is, nor is he a good judge of whether or not I am qualified or not. I would say the only thing he's not qualified to make that determination would be my argument, if that makes sense. But as far as like the campaign, I honestly don't know. I know that I'm sure I could do more to have more signs in out. But it's just something this is a learning experience for me. Is there a part of that question? I feel like because it's kind of like a triple parter. So I want to make sure I answer you fully here.
I think you've given us an impression.
Okay.
Very good. About almost 10 after now. Any other closing questions or, well, yeah, I hit the wrong button. Any other closing questions or comments we've got for Kyle? Appreciate everyone's attention and being here. And thank you, Kyle, for showing up and being here with us, spending some time. Want to thank everyone for being here. And remember, next week is going to be a different meeting for us. It's been, what, 2-3 years since we met in person. So we wanted to be thinking differently as far as questions. We usually have questions for candidates, and we're used to sticking those out in chat. Announcements. Pam has done a wonderful job of transitioning from live announcements to putting them on out so people can see them and email them. So we want to be thinking, how are we going to handle this for next week? So I've got a gavel around here somewhere. I'll bring that. I think it's going to be interesting. If you're available to all people, come on next week to the Democratic headquarters. The plan is to have it outdoors unless the weather's inclement. Last I looked last night, it's going to be, I think, in the 60s, so a little cool for me, but sunshiny, very small chance of rain. So I think next week it's going to be decent. We'll either be outside or we'll move in if it gets bad. Herb, you got your hand raised again. Go ahead.
I just want to make sure that we emphasize how much we appreciate your running for auditor, how much we appreciate your coming to us this day and sharing with us. And I will all give you a round of applause right now before we concentrate on business.
All right, very good.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thanks
much.
again, Kyle.